If an eyewitness saw the intruder leaving the house at 4:17 a.m. and never calls 911, that's a pretty good indication that they're buying time. But why? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about something that I've been thinking about as far as Dylan and Bethany, as well as the 8-hour time gap that it took for 911 to be called. Now, I know that I continue going back to Dylan and Bethany, and there's a reason for that. It's because I believe that Dylan and Bethany, along with the 8-hour time gap that it took to call 911, are key to what happened that night at the King Roadhouse. Now, there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to the aspects of these crimes. But one aspect of these crimes where there's really not a lot of possibilities is the fact that Dylan saw the intruder at 4:17 a.m. and never called 911. That's a very strange aspect of these crimes. And I think that that's one of the aspects that draws a lot of us, to have questions about these Idaho 4 crimes. It doesn't make sense that Dylan saw the intruder at 4:17 a.m. and then just went back to bed. I'm not really going for the whole, frozen shock phase. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, I definitely agree that Dylan could have been shocked when she saw the intruder if she had heard everything that was going on upstairs. But then to not call 911 after she saw this intruder, there's just really no explanation for that, in my opinion. Now, is it possible that Dylan and Bethany were maybe covering for somebody or people? Is it possible that Dylan and Bethany knew the individual or individuals who committed these crimes, and that's the reason that they didn't call 911? Now, there's also the aspect of the fact that this crime scene appeared to have been cleaned. Now, why would Dylan and Bethany clean this crime scene? We know that there was a latent footprint found in front of Dylan's bedroom door, and that footprint was made up of body fluid. Now, whoever left this footprint cleaned it up, or they thought they had cleaned it up, but it was found by forensics. So I have a hard time believing that Brian Kohberger walked past Dylan's bedroom, left, a bloody footprint in front of her door, and then went back and cleaned that footprint up. I just have a hard time believing that that's what he did. So that leads me to believe that one of the two surviving roommates cleaned up this footprint. Now, if they cleaned up this footprint, it's very possible that they were cleaning the common areas inside this house. It's very possible that they were trying to clean up the trail that was left behind. But why? Why would they do this? Bethany and Dylan did not know Brian Kohberger. They have no connection to Brian Kohberger. So, is it just a coincidence, if Brian Kohberger did commit these crimes, that he went into the house, committed a quadruple homicide, left the house, and then Dylan and Bethany cleaned up after him? Now, why would they do that? They don't know Brian Kohberger as far as we know. So is it possible that they knew the individual or individuals who committed these crimes? Is it possible that Dylan and Bethany were cleaning the crime scene in order to cover for whoever it was that committed these crimes, which would lead us to believe that they knew these people? It's been reported that Dylan and Bethany called people to the house that mid-morning. But why? Why did they call people to the house if they weren't aware that their roommates were deceased in their bedrooms? Why did Dylan and Bethany make it a point to call people to the crime scene? It's very possible that maybe they called these people to the crime scene so to create a situation where they weren't the only two people in this house. And maybe they were hoping that one of the people that they called to the house would discover the bodies, which would kind of remove them from that situation. Because they obviously know that they haven't called 911. So they obviously know that that's going to be a problem when law enforcement gets there. Because that's going to be one of the first questions is, if you saw the intruder at 4:17 a.m., why didn't you call 911? So maybe this 8-hour delay gave Bethany and Dylan time to clean these common areas because maybe they wouldn't want the people that they called over that mid-morning to just walk into, body fluid all over the house. Because then these people who come over mid-morning are probably going to ask Bethany and Dylan, why haven't you called 911 yet? So is it possible that Bethany and Dylan cleaned the common areas so that the people who came over at mid-morning wouldn't just, wouldn't see the body fluid and the mess that was left behind right away and question why Dylan and Bethany hadn't called 911? But this raises another question, and that is that when these people were called over mid-morning, were the bodies discovered at that time? Were they discovered before that, or were they discovered at that time? Because even if these bodies were discovered in the mid-morning, 911 was still not called until almost noon. So what were these people that came over? What were these people that came over that morning doing until almost noon? Is it possible maybe that Ethan's best friend was one of these people that was called over that morning and maybe just thought that Ethan and Xana were still asleep? It's very possible that Ethan's best friend came to the house, thought that Ethan and Xana were still sleeping, and finally decided that he was going to go and wake up Ethan and went into Xana's bedroom. And this is when he discovers Ethan and Xana. Now, is this when 911 is finally called? Were Ethan and Xana not discovered until almost noon? Because if they were discovered any sooner than that, then that's going to raise a lot of questions. It raises a lot of questions about why so many people didn't call 911. Were these people covering for other people? Were these people covering for people that they knew? Is it possible that the people who came over that morning did not know that these 4 roommates' lives had been taken and that they were behind closed doors in their bedrooms? Is it possible that they didn't realize that anything was going on? It just doesn't make sense because Dylan saw this intruder at 4:17 a.m.? Wouldn't Dylan have told these people why she was calling them over that morning? It's a real head scratcher as to, first of all, why Dylan and Bethany did not call 911. I mean, it seems as though they would have heard exactly what was going on in this house. And then Dylan confirms to law enforcement that she saw this person at 4:17 a.m. So, what were they doing this whole time between 4 a.m. and almost noon? So, did Dylan just not tell the people who came over that morning that her 4 roommates were deceased in these bedrooms? Because if these people who came over that morning knew what had happened in this house, then they also neglected to call 911. So how do you get all these people not to call 911? They would have to be wondering, when are the police coming? Where are the first responders? They would have to be wondering what's going on and why 911 hasn't been called. So is it possible that when Dylan called them to the house, she didn't tell them anything about these victims? I mean, it would just seem odd that the people who came to this house, out of all of the people who came to this house, not one of them thought to call 911. Now, is it possible that nobody called 911 because they were buying time? They were stalling for time. Maybe to get the crime scene straightened out. Maybe to get their story straight about what they were going to tell law enforcement. But if Dylan and Bethany were the only 2 people left in this house, and then they called these people over that morning, now all of these people are involved in this crime. So it just seems odd that Ethan's best friend would show up right before noon, find Ethan and Xana, and that he would call 911 right away. Because what was happening in the house this whole entire morning? To me, it looks like these surviving roommates were buying time. It seems to me as though they were stalling. And why? There has to be a reason as to why they were stalling for time. There has to be a reason as to why they cleaned up that footprint. Why would you clean up a crime scene? Especially if you were in shock. So why? Why were these roommates cleaning and stalling for time before they called law enforcement if they weren't involved in any way? If Bryan Kohberger committed these crimes, and they have no association to Bryan Kohberger, why would they stall for time? Why would they clean up after Bryan Kohberger? So this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is that it would be one heck of a coincidence that somebody that they didn't even know came in and committed these crimes, and then they just decided not to call 911. That would be a pretty strange coincidence to me, considering that they have no connection to Bryan Kohberger. So I've just been trying to find this connection as to if they didn't know who committed these crimes, why does it appear that they're covering for whoever committed these crimes? That's just something that has never really made sense to me. That if Bryan Kohberger committed these crimes and they have no connection to him, why would they first of all, stall for time? And why would they clean up the crime scene? They don't know Bryan Kohberger. It just doesn't make sense that there were two roommates in this house who were left alive, who were in this house when these crimes were occurring, and then one of these roommates witnessed the intruder, and then they decided to clean the crime scene and not call 911? That just doesn't make sense. Tell me what you think. Do you think that it's just a coincidence that Bryan Kohberger went in and committed this quadruple homicide, and then the surviving roommates decided to clean up after him and not call 911? Let me know what you think. Please like and please subscribe to my channel if you like my content. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. We'll see you next time.